start with this. Well, Vergil Ortiz himself had to field some questions in reference to a nasty rumor that was started by ESPN's Mark Kriegel. He was asked, is it true that you turned down the Terrence Crawford fight? The group chat wants to know, to which Vergil replied, that is a lie. Robert Rinaldi said, well, that's what Kriegel is saying, to which Vergil Ortiz replied, I don't know who that is, but no such fight was offered. Roberto Diaz of Golden Boy Promotions stated, let me be very clear. Vergil Ortiz has never turned down anyone at any time. On the contrary, he wants all the smoke and then some. He is ready, and when the time is right, and the time comes, he will fight Terrence Crawford and beat him like he has done everyone else. Until then, the focus is Mean Machine. I just want to preface everything I'm about to say with this.
What?
I'm not trying to castigate Vergil or anyone over there on the top rank side of things for that matter. I never thought at any moment that this was going to be Vergil Ortiz's next fight upon his victory over Mighty Mo Hooker. In spite of the call-out, in spite of what he had to say after the fight, I never thought that fight was going to be the next fight. Didn't think it would materialize that fast, and I'm not at all surprised to see that it's not Terrence Crawford that Vergil's fighting next. It's Igis Kavaliauskas, and I am okay with that fight, by the way. I think it's a fun fight. I think it's going to be a fun fight. I think it's a good learning fight, a good developmental fight for Vergil Ortiz. But I reiterate, in spite of Vergil's call-out,
I knew that wasn't going to be his next fight.
I think that a lot of people are trying to turn a mountain into a molehill, and it's because they have an agenda. I think there are a lot of people out there that aren't happy that the WBO ordered that fight between Terrence and Sean, and what they would have preferred was for the WBO to order a fight between Terrence and Vergil. It being that this kind of puts Sean Portier and the PBC in the hot seat.
It does.
Since the order came down, both Terrence Crawford and Bob Arum have reacted to it, and they're all for it. They want to do the fight.
That's what they're saying.
The question is, does Sean want the fight? Does he really want the fight? Because based on him being the mandatory challenger, the only way this fight doesn't happen is if he doesn't want it. And I happen to think there are a lot of people, they don't like this situation. They don't like how it might make Sean and the PBC look. Because of this, they're turning their attention to the WBO's ranked standings, where Vergil Ortiz is actually ranked ahead of Sean as their number one contender. One might feel so inclined to ask, well, wait a minute, if Vergil's the number one contender, why is Sean being ordered to fight Terrence? Why isn't Vergil?
And that is a valid question.
Ulterior motives and agendas aside, Vergil Ortiz did mention Terrence Crawford by name. He himself did express an interest in fighting Terrence Crawford, and he is the WBO's number one contender. So why is it that Sean was installed as the mandatory challenger and not Vergil?
I think people are asking the wrong questions.
I reiterate, I'm not here to castigate or assign blame to anyone, but I am going to cut to the chase. I am going to get to the point. Fights don't get made in the sport of boxing by accident.
They really don't.
When you say that you want to fight a guy, and you really want to fight the guy, your team's going to do something about it. They're going to get the wheels in motion in order to make that fight a reality. I don't know that people are asking either Vergil or Roberto Diaz the right questions. But the right question to ask isn't if you turned down that fight. The right question to ask is, what have you done in order to land that fight?
Did you petition the WBO?
Did you call Paco to see about having your fighter installed as Terrence's mandatory challenger? You know, because your fighter wants that fight so fucking bad. Did you do that? Did you call Bob?
To see about making the fight voluntarily.
To have Terrence defend his WBO title against Vergil as a voluntary title defense as opposed to a mandatory one.
Did you do that?
The question is, from the time you called him out after the Mighty Mo Hooker fight till now, what has either he or his team done to get that Crawford fight?
Because the onus isn't on Crawford at top rank.
Vergil Ortiz is not his mandatory challenger, and neither Terrence Crawford or anybody at top rank, they're not saying they offered Vergil a fight and he turned it down.
Apparently it's Mark Kriegel saying that.
So you've got to go to Mark Kriegel, get the answer from the horse's mouth. Ask him where it is he came across that information. You've got to ask Paco, hey Paco, why'd you guys install Sean as the mandatory and not Vergil? Vergil's the number one contender, not Sean. Or is it that you were going to try to install him as the mandatory challenger, but somebody on his side didn't want that position, didn't want that fight for their fighter just yet? There's a lot of questions that need to be asked if you really want to get the answer to this, though ultimately I think it's much ado about nothing because I repeat, never expected this to be Vergil Ortiz's very next fight. I didn't. And I think the reason a lot of people are asking all these questions is because underneath it all, they're actually angry that the WBO installed Sean as Terrence's mandatory challenger and not Vergil. These are people that have been quite content nitpicking whoever it is Terrence Crawford's been fighting the last couple of years.
They've had a lot of fun with that.
And this situation, Sean Portier being installed as the mandatory challenger, well, this situation threatens their fun because what it's going to expose is how bad Sean wants this fight or how bad Sean doesn't want this fight. They don't like that. They would have preferred to carry on making fun of Terrence Crawford and his quality of competition, knowing that he's been frozen out by the PBC. I mean, they know that.
Well, in some instances, they've actually supported it.
They'll watch the PBC and its fighters, its champions, freeze Terrence Crawford out, and then make fun of Terrence Crawford, make fun of his welterweight resume for having not fought those fighters, even though they know he's been frozen out.
No, all of a sudden, everybody's so fucking quizzical.
Don't get me wrong. It's a valid question in some ways, it is. Though the answer to it might be as simple as Vergil's booked. Vergil's got a fight coming up with Egis Kavaliauskas. Maybe that's why he was bypassed.
It might be that simple.
But because certain people are unhappy with the WBO's order, they want someone to take their frustration out on. That someone appears to be Vergil Ortiz. Now, they want to make it about Vergil turning down the fight instead of pouring that energy into the Porter versus Crawford fight. I mean, do you see how this breaks down? The WBO orders a fight between Terrence and Sean, and what some people want to focus on is how we got there, whether or not Vergil turned down the fight. Why would that be the focal point?
What fucking difference does that make?
What, you don't like the order? You don't want Terrence to fight Sean?
You'd rather he fight Vergil instead.
Why's that? I mean, if it were to turn out that, maybe the fight were offered to them or the mandatory position were offered to them beforehand and it was rejected, not saying that it was, I'm just saying if it turned out to be that way. And
so what?
Shouldn't the particulars associated with that take a back seat to the good news that the WBO has stepped in and now they're ordering a fight between Terrence and a PBC fighter?
No, I don't know. Maybe that's not good news to your ears.
But it's good news to mine. And that's why when Mark Kriegel said what he said, I didn't make much light of it. I really didn't fucking care. My attention was elsewhere. Maybe Vergil's people didn't do anything to get the fight, or maybe they were offered the fight and turned it down, or maybe they didn't want to be installed as Terrence's mandatory challengers. Who fucking knows? Who fucking cares?
I don't.
I'll say this much. In the sport of boxing, fights don't just happen on their own. They don't just happen by accident. Some effort has to go into making them. I myself don't think that the people over there at Golden Boy Promotions wanted that fight for their fighter just yet, even if he himself might have wanted it. I don't think they made any effort to make a fight with Terrence Crawford.
I really don't.
I didn't expect them to. I'm not the least bit surprised that they ended up fighting one of Terrence Crawford's old opponents instead. That is what I was expecting. And I'm perfectly okay with the WBO's order for Sean Porter to fight Terrence Crawford instead. Sean Porter is the mandatory challenger. And that's where my focus is. I don't really care to sit here and play the blame game over whether or not Golden Boy tried to make the fight. If I'm being honest, I don't think they did, but I didn't think they would. I don't really think it's a question of whether or not they turned down the fight, because that denotes an offer, and I don't see anybody at Top Rank saying that they offered Vergil the fight. It's a question of, what did you do to get it? Because after your last fight, you called him out. So after that happened, what did either you or your team do to secure that Crawford fight? And if I'm being honest, I don't think they did anything, and I didn't expect them to.
I'm cool with the Mean Machine fight.
I like it, and I like the WBO's order. I like that they installed Sean Porter as Terrence Crawford's mandatory challenger. I like that. Finally, the ongoing situation in the lightweight division between Teofimo Lopez and the people over there at Triller. Lopez versus Kambosos. Arum has a plan in place for ESPN to air the fight if the IBF rules that Triller has defaulted. Bob Arum informed BoxingScene.com that Top Rank has reserved an undisclosed date in September for ESPN to televise the Lopez versus Kambosos bout if the IBF rules that the Triller Fight Club has defaulted on its winning bid for their lightweight title fight. Bob Arum was quoted as saying,
"If the Triller bidder defaults,
then it goes to the second bidder, and that's Matchroom. And they don't have to do it. There's no consequences for them passing, and then it's up to us if we want to do it. And the answer is, we most definitely want to do it. We'll do the fight in September, but again, we might not have the opportunity. One, the IBF may decide in favor of Triller, and Triller makes everything right and does the fight on an appropriate date in the United States in September. A lot of things can happen, but as Tio's promoter, besides signing a new contract with him, we're obligated to do the fight if other arrangements fall through.
The issue here is that Triller Fight Club, after moving the date several times, petitioned the IBF to allow the company to reschedule Lopez versus Kambosos for October 17th at Bank West Stadium in Sydney, Kambosos' hometown. Lopez does not want to fight Kambosos in Australia primarily because COVID-19 restrictions in Australia would require him to be quarantined in a hotel room for 2 weeks, which would prohibit Lopez from preparing properly to box Kambosos. If the IBF declines the Triller Fight Club defaulted on its own bid, Lopez and Kambosos would be entitled to a 65-35 split of the $1.2 million deposit Triller Fight Club was required to make after winning the purse bid. In addition, Lopez and Kambosos would divide either bid made by Matchroom or Top Rank's offer for a 65-35 split. The IBF's ruling regarding Lopez versus Kambosos could come as soon as the end of the week. Real nail biter.
If Triller defaults, they're out $1.2 million.
That is if the IBF rules that they've defaulted. Though in trying to host this thing, they might be out a lot more money than that. They might. I mean, this is a tough sell. This is not a big fight. They decided to put up $6 million in order to stage this fight on their side of the street. And there's no telling if they can get that money back billing this fight as a pay-per-view in either the US or Australia.
There really isn't.
They grossly overpaid for this fight. I mean, for a perspective, we're always hearing about Matchroom's wallet, you know, how generous the people over there are at Matchroom and DAZN. And, you know, the people over there at Matchroom, they only bid a little over $3 million for this fight. Triller bid double that amount.
Talk about your pissing contest.
They overshot it. They grossly overshot it. This is not that kind of fight. This fight is not a hot ticket. And at this point, well into the year of 2021, whatever momentum Teofimo Lopez had amassed in beating Vasyl Lomachenko, it has all but dissipated, because since then, Vasyl Lomachenko has rebounded off that loss to Teofimo Lopez. And Teofimo, he's been out of action this whole time.
This fight's got no buzz.
It turns out that Triller has defaulted on the fight. They're out $1.2 million, yes, but that might be a blessing in disguise for the people over there at Triller, because they might have been out more than that trying to put this thing on.
After placing that gargantuan bid.
Teofimo Lopez doesn't want to fight in October, and he doesn't want to fight in Sydney due to the COVID restrictions. He doesn't want to fight at a later date past November, past Thanksgiving, due to his wife's pregnancy and the birth of his first child.
This itty-bitty fight is riddled with problems.
Sounding a lot like it's up to Uncle Bob now to swoop in and save the day. There is a chance that because Matchroom placed the second highest bid, should Triller default, well, fight then goes to Matchroom. Matchroom then has the option of staging it or passing on it. And who knows what the people over there at Matchroom, Eddie Hearn, might decide to do, because they might try to use this as an opportunity to stick it to Uncle Bob based on what happened with the Joshua versus Fury collapse, you know?
Not a secret that they feel raw about it.
Not a secret that Eddie Hearn was none too pleased to have so much of his time and his energy wasted trying to make that fight, when it looks a lot like the Fury people,
Arum,
top-ranked people, they never had any actual intention of going through with it. It looks like they always planned on fighting Deontay Wilder for a third time, which means they wasted Eddie's time knowing that they were wasting his time.
So maybe he uses this as an opportunity to stick it to him.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe he decides to take the high road in an effort to preserve the working relationship so that moving forward, there's no friction, there's no rift, because he's still holding out hope to make that Joshua versus Fury fight if Fury comes through the Wilder trilogy. On that premise, maybe he decides to just let Bob have the fight and let them do it on their side of the street on their own terms.
Maybe.
He still is Bob's fighter, after all.
Too many fucking variables.
We don't know if Triller's going to default on this thing or not, though if they do, that does make the situation a little less complicated, and then it becomes a question of, does Matchroom really want to put this fight on or not?
No, they probably won't.
Who knows? And if the fight ends up on the top rank side of things, set to go down at an undisclosed date in September, well,
If that happens.
Bob will have effectively sorted out the situation, though Teofimo Lopez will have lost a considerable amount of time just for the fight to end up on the top rank side of things anyway. And no, not for an exorbitant amount of money. And that would be one hell of a life lesson for young Teofimo Lopez now, wouldn't it? That if something seems too good to be true, it probably is.
That's if it happens that way, though.
That's if Triller doesn't find a way to accommodate everyone and sort this thing out themselves. Stage it in the United States before October, in September.
Can they do that?
Oh, yeah, they can do it. Question is, can they do it and generate the $6 million they put up in order to stage this thing in the first place? I mean, why do you think they were looking abroad?
Why is that?
Why do you think they were looking to stage this thing down there in Australia, in Sydney?
Must have felt that it'd do better business there than it would here.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be looking to stage it over there in the first fucking place.
For all the fucking problems that's caused.
Tell you, there's been more talk about the fucking purse bid than the actual fight. The purse bid situation has been more interesting than the matchup, and that's a testament to how this is not a big fight.